Well, I get to introduce you quick. I know you're like super excited to go for it. So, I get to introduce you all to Maddie. I'm sure you all know Maddie, yes, but she does have an official autobiography. She's the daughter of Ron and Darla Hopwood of Shelby, Nebraska. She's a 2021 graduate of Shelby Rising City High School, and she majored in business administration and management. And she's been on the dean's list, served on campus-wide student panels, been involved in the Honors Club, Alpha Lambda Delta, and is serving as Vice President of Chapter Operations for Delta Sigma Pi. She's graduating in May and getting ready to move back home and start her new job, which I'm super excited for her. So it's with great privilege and honor and excitement that I get first off to introduce Maddie, and secondly present you with your cords that you will get to wear at graduation. So congratulations.
Okay, so I've had a couple of different experiences with working remotely or just some different flexible arrangements, so that kind of piqued an interest, so I took an examination then on flex time and the effect on workplace equities and motivation that it would have. So to start off, there's a few different types of remote work or flexible work. The first off is fully remote workers. These are those individuals that are working solely from home, they're never in the office. And then you have adjusted work weeks. These can be people that are working maybe 4 10-hour days as opposed to those 8-hour days, or possibly working 32 hours instead of 40 hours a week. Then you get into the hybrid workers, and there's many different variations of this. So hybrid at-will workers are the individuals that get to choose when they're in the office and when they're working from home. So there's no set schedule for these people. They just kind of float around as they please. Hybrid split weeks and hybrid shift work are both individual people that they work from home, but they also have designated days that they have to be in the office. The thing that sets these two apart is for hybrid split weeks, it's the company that designates these days. For hybrid shift work, it's the direct team leader or manager that designates the days for the team to be in. And then hybrid flexible weeks is any combination of those three. And then we'll keep going on into here for the benefits. So benefits for the company of having flexible work is you're going to have increased productivity, you're going to have less emissions from less commuters traveling back and forth. There's going to be less turnover from happier employees, less sick leave used, which is going to be a major cost saved for companies. And then there was also a study that was conducted on 32-hour work weeks of their effects. And through this, it was found that the overall experience was rated an 8.5 out of 10. With that, then productivity in business was rated a 7.5 out of 10, so these were pretty good results here. And then revenue also increased by 1.5%, despite the fact that they were only working 32 hours rather than the expected 40 hours. There was also an 18% increase in access for customers. Now this might seem weird because there's 8 hours shorter in the work week, but the way they did it is they staggered out their employees, so they were actually open longer hours than they normally would have been. And then benefits for the employee is you have an improved emotional well-being. It gives employees the opportunity to align their personal and professional goals, and they get that sense of comfort. If employees are working from home, they're already comfortable with where they're working. They no longer have to worry about what's going on in the office, who said what. They're working from where their comfort is at. That same study that I just referred to found that for the employees side, 39% of these employees reported that they were less stressed, which led to 71% of them experience reduced levels of burnout, which leads into then 57% of these had, or there was a 57% drop in resignations. This is also going to be a huge cost-saving measure for companies because you no longer have that extra added cost of rehiring, doing orientation costs, all of that cost associated that way. Additionally, for employees, then they had extra time for their personal and family appointments. They no longer had to stress about how are we going to squeeze this all in with work. And there was less sick days taken because employees that can at least keep up on your emails at home, you no longer come back to work with 100 of emails that you're lost on. So the sick leave kind of went down a little bit that way, and reduced daycare costs because you could work out with your partner or something that way in terms of taking care of children, or if they could be in the other room if they're old enough, that sense. But overall, it led to happier, healthier, more satisfied employees that were willing to stick with the company longer, and employees had more time to spend with their family. And then looking at the company culture here, so there was another study that was done in 2003 that said that half of new hires joined the company that they did solely for the purpose that they offered a flexible work environment. So this offers a great recruitment technique for employees because it opens the pool for a whole new, or opens the opportunity for a whole new pool of new hires. So this can be individuals who maybe are disabled and can't come into the office due to different restrictions that way, or it can have and eliminate some geographical barriers. So rather than trying to find someone that's only 20 miles away, maybe you can have someone that's 6 states away. This also opens the door for more versatility because you kind of have to be more adaptive in how you're developing your employees, and employees are going to be solving their own problems more, which then gives some new ideas on like your company problems, and your individual employees are going to give their ideas more because they're going to have more of that problem-solving skills. This is also going to, like I said, encourage that individual independence because they have to solve those problems, and overall your employees are going to be more well-rounded. And then one way here that one company, so J.M. Smuckers, was dealing with this remote work is they allow workers, as long as you're in the United States, you can work for them. They don't care where you're located, you just have to be within the country, but they do require what they call these core weeks, and they designate these at least a year in advance, and you have to be on site during those core weeks. And that's how they can kind of get those relationships built up that way, but that was kind of their solution for here. With this, there's also many challenges that come with it. So challenges that are faced by the company is we're trying to switch from that business focus to now we have to switch to an employee focus. And this is something that I'll kind of dive into more in depth later. But then we also have the proximity of employees, which is causing a big issue in terms of scheduling meetings because within the United States, it's not as big of a deal where it's just a few hours of variation in time zone. But if you have someone on the other side of the world where it's a 12-hour difference, suddenly someone has to be up in the middle of the night for a meeting. You also have some issues with collaboration and connection just because you're lacking that richness of face-to-face interaction. And then there's a blurred boundary between work and leisure. So this has been a major conversation here lately because of many managers or different companies are fearing the fact that if you're working from home, are you actually working? Or are you doing the laundry, doing the dishes, doing something else? So there's kind of that blurred boundary here. If you're no longer just at work or you're no longer just at home, it's kind of getting blended together. And then of course another big issue here has been communication, which I kind of alluded to, where you're lacking that richness of the face-to-face interactions. There's also some different challenges that are faced by individuals or work teams themselves. So the first of which is the digital divide, or there's differences in who has access to internet connection and the stability of it. And that can have anything to do with your income or just your geographical location. So there's some different inequalities that come with that digital divide, as well as employees are more likely to take on added work when they're working from home. And there's 3 main reasons that I want to go over for why they can take on more work. The first of which is gift exchange. Essentially, this is your manager has gifted you the opportunity to work from home. Now I have to say a thank you. Now I have to repay him to make it even. So I'm going to take on more work to make up for that. The second, which is enabled intensification, which is those blurred boundaries that I kind of alluded to before, but kind of twisting it a bit more. So now instead of working 8-hour days in your office, your work is right on your phone, it's right on your computer, it's one room away. You're going to be working all the time. You can't shut out work, and suddenly now you're working 12, maybe even 14-hour days. And then the third one here is enforced intensification. This is when you're taking on more work yourself, you're putting all that work on your shoulders so that you can give that flexibility to someone else. Flexible work is also going to have an impact on local economies because there's going to be less people in the cities, which is going to generate less tax revenue because people won't be going out for lunches, coffees, things like that. So this can really hurt, especially those local mom and pop stores that are smaller and they rely on those lunch rushes or whatever. So actually in Orville, Ohio, which is the headquarters of J.M. Smuckers that I referred to previously, they had reported a shortfall of $1 million in tax revenue due to different pandemic-related activities. So do note that this isn't just because of remote workers. This had to do with all of the pandemic issues, but this is something to kind of keep on our radar of, if we're working from home, how is that going to affect our local stores? And we have had a recent push here for flexible work, and this is kind of why I wanted to look into this a bit more, because we're starting to focus more on it, because with the pandemic, obviously everyone was switching. So in 2020, there was a study that said that 17.4% of the workforce was testing out working from home. Now, I can probably tell you that I would not be surprised if this number has increased significantly, because this was at the beginning of the pandemic, and now things are becoming more and more regular for it because everyone else is doing it. There was also a group of companies within the UK that tested out working from home, and through their study, only 2 of the companies decided to go back to working in the office. So there was enough there with that working from home that they found that they liked it and they stuck with it. And another reason for trying to push for this is kind of to give jobs a refresh, because many employees have been working extended overtime hours to try to make up for the shortages that were as a result of the pandemic. So now working from home can kind of be a refresh and reduce that burnout that many employees are facing. In addition to this push here, many employees are refusing or don't want to return back to the office despite companies wanting them back in the office. So some companies are having to deploy some different initiatives to get people back in the office. So some of these are compromising those days off, so that might be back to those hybrid examples that I had brought up, where they're going to require them to be in the office for maybe 2 days rather than working from home all the time. Another thing is relaxed dress codes. Many companies are moving away from that business professional or business casual, and they're now allowing denim in their dress codes, just to kind of bring them in that way. There's also been, if you work in the office, you can get an added bonus as opposed to if you were at home. In addition, they've also been renovating office spaces to make them feel a little bit more homey and lively, and they're offering different free food and cafeteria services. Another firm, a law firm here, they had a different approach to it a little bit, and that was based off of their experience and seniority. So junior associates were required to be on site for at least 3 days a week, because this allowed them to have the opportunity to gain that experience that's needed and be able to train them on that. Senior associates, on the other hand, they could choose when they wanted to be in the office. If they wanted to work fully remote, they can work fully remote. This is also not a new idea of working, for having either remote work or flexible work, because back in 1956, President Nixon stated that 4-day work weeks would be a reality in the not too distant future. And I don't know if this is what you define as not too distant future, but this is going to be, I mean, it's the reality now, because some of you may be familiar with last year there was a strike against the big three automakers. That would be Stellantis, General Motors, and Ford. And they were pushing for more PTO and shorter work weeks. Now the result of this was a 46-day strike that hurt the companies pretty well. And they didn't actually end up getting any more PTO or shorter weeks. Instead, they got a 25% increase in pay and a cost of living adjustment. So now I'm going to look at some of the inequalities that may exist within flexible work or that way. So first off is the blue-collar workers versus white-collar workers. Generally, when you think of this, white-collar workers have more flexibility in their work because most of the time they're working from a laptop. As long as I have my laptop and I have internet, I can work from a coffee shop, I can work from home, I can work from the office. But you think of blue-collar workers, say a factory worker, for example, they can't take the whole assembly line to a coffee shop. So there's not as much flexibility in that sense. There's also some jobs that just should not be done from home. For example, kindergarten teachers, firefighters, nurses, you're probably not going to want them helping you when you're at home, or when they're at home kind of thing. And then kind of like I alluded to here previously with that strike, even though this union was fighting for more PTO and shorter weeks, we still saw that they didn't get that, so they just got more pay. So there's some inequalities in terms of their flexibility that's still being had here, even though the union was fighting for it. Another issue to talk about here with this is the data and security breaches. Some companies, they are working with such vital data that's so important that it's just not safe to work from home. And then other things that have been identified is SHRM, which if you're not familiar with that, that's the Society of Human Resource Management. They've identified some possible violations in regards to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So that what they've identified there is there's possible wage and hour compliance or some benefits issues that may exist that way. So that's something to be aware of as we switch to flexible work. There's also been some differences based on gender in terms of flexible work. So for men that are working from home, it's expected that they increase their productivity. Now they're supposed to be putting in overtime hours to be able to boost their numbers. And those that are doing this are said to be wearing the progressive badge of merit because they're able to balance their work and their family life because they're working from home. But on the other side, you look at women and they're working from home, and now the expectation for them is that they have to increase their domestic tasks. So now it comes back into that fear of that blurring of boundaries of it's not expected for men, but it's expected for women to be doing the dishes, tending to the kids, doing something else while they're supposed to be working from home. Some of the women have also reported that there was less opportunity for promotion as they were working from home. This could be due to some different issues though, like those proximity distances that I mentioned before. Just not being on site can be a disadvantage for you in terms of promotions that way, but it's something to consider in terms of gender differences. You also have to take into consideration the type of organization that you're considering, because how many employees do you have working? Do you only have 2 employees and it's not viable to be working from home for that? Or how many different locations do you have? How big is your organization? Are you a small mom and pop store or are you a big corporation? And then your financial position, which is going to be a big one. Do you have that extra money to invest or not? And then the digital divide, as I talked about before, which this can have different issues with your location, your income, anything of that sort. Everyone has variations in what they have access to. And then IT departments. Do you have access to a good IT department? Because this is going to be a huge financial investment because you have to be able to maintain the technology that you need. You have to be able to have the security that you need so you don't have data breaches. And you have to be able to have personnel that they know what's going on, they can do basic maintenance of this stuff. And then they have to also be able to program your online platforms. So that financial position is a huge key to look at in the size of the organization if they can invest in remote work. And then going on into motivation here, some challenges that have existed with motivation is building that relationship of trust through technology because you're lacking that richness of face-to-face conversation. And through this, then it also makes managers struggle to recognize employees' personal needs. So without having that daily interaction, you can't determine exactly what you need to be giving to the employee. Many managers that are managing remote workers are also tend to fall into that pattern of more and more policies, which actually tends to result in a demotivation. So doing more and more policies is demotivating to the employee. But that's kind of without them being right there, you want to make sure that they're producing that work that you want. And then you also need to be able to allow employees the chance to solve the problems that matter. But when you can't see them, you can't see what's actually going on. It's a little harder to put that trust in them. There was also a study that was conducted from 2010 to 2015. Now, this study did yield that working from home was found to be less motivating, but that isn't the part that I want to focus on because the study was almost 10 years ago. Technology has evolved, our society has evolved in the way of our expectations now. But there is a few things that I want to take out of this. They identified 3 positive motivators and 3 negative motivators through this study. So the 3 positive things that you need to find a balance between is play, purpose, and pleasure. Try to find a way that you can balance those ideas to make you satisfied with where you're working and motivate yourself to continue on. 3 negative motivators that you may find are emotional pleasure. Are you satisfied with your job or do you hate your job? You're just there for the money. Which then leads you into economic pressure. Do you have what you need to provide for yourself, to provide for your family, to support the lifestyle that you want to or need to live? And then lastly is inertia, which is that struggle to escape the negative thoughts. So if you are dissatisfied with your job, or if you don't have the money that you need to provide for yourself, you're stuck in this like never-ending tunnel of I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. And inertia is what is in motion stays in motion. So suddenly you're stuck in this never-ending tunnel of negative thoughts. Which then leads me into self-determination theory, which is how we can try to motivate our employees to get out of that spiral of inertia. So there's 3 components that go into self-determination theory, the first of which is autonomy, which is that need to be in control of your personal choices and actions. And managers can support this need through goal setting or career development activities that can help build upon them that way. The second component here is competence, or the need to be able to master current skills and learn new skills. This can be done through added training and development that you have that way. And then the third component is relatedness, which is that need to have a sense of belonging within your organization. Do you feel welcomed? So this is going to be highly dependent on organizational culture because they have to embody that culture of welcomeness and cohesiveness in that sense. Which then, as I kind of mentioned here previously in the presentation, was employee-centered versus job-centered focus. So the old traditional style was kind of that job-centered focus. Now we need to move into the employee-centered. So previously we were focused on those short-term results of we got to meet quotas, we got to do this, and just meet everything within the week essentially. And it was focused on those tasks. Now we need to transfer into a more transformational leadership here in terms of we're focused on the long-term goals. We're focused on building that trust and respect and making a more cohesive team that's going to actually end up leading to intrinsic motivation rather than trying to find ways that you have to motivate your employees, because suddenly if your employees are all cohesive, they're going to find ways to motivate each other in that sense. And then so finally here we're going to get into my recommendations that I have based off of my research. So first recommendation I have is for flexible workers, use empowering leadership. Empowering leadership can increase individual and team performance, and it allows the employees to manage their tasks independently. And when employees aren't directly on site through remote work, they have to have that sense of independence. So rather than having a micromanager leaning over their shoulder making sure of what's happening, you need to empower them to be able to make their decisions on their own and be able to grow on their own. Reasons for this here, so there was a study that was conducted on 405 employees, and this found that, kind of back to that self-determination theory that I was referring to before, where the basic needs of autonomy and competence were met, they found that that third component of relatedness just automatically followed in. So if you're meeting those basic needs, the other things that you need are going to follow. In addition to empowering leadership, there's a book that was written by Kristen Hadid, which is Permission to Screw Up. She found that she had created a cleaning business while she was in college, and her focus throughout this whole thing was, how can I make my employees happy? And as she did this, she found that there was many added benefits. So one of this was she didn't have to spend the money on company advertising because if her employees were happy, her customers were happy. She also had learned kind of the hard way that her employees were always capable of making their own solutions and solving problems, but she was giving them or taking away their opportunity for solving these problems. So once she discovered this, she found that she should just encourage her employees to solve their own problems rather than dictating them in that sense. So through this, it was an experience for her just to test it out, and she found that her job was actually not to direct the employees, but rather to guide and support them, which then created confident employees, allowed them to grow personally and professionally, and it actually fostered a culture of trust in her company, which benefited her in the long run, because she actually had a few different employees who had offers from pretty renowned organizations, and they turned down those offers just on the basis of the culture she had created with her company. Along with empowering leadership here, Hadid had mentioned a book, which is The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. Within this book here, he identified 3 main causes for poor work experiences. The first of which here was emmeasurement, which is that lack of immediate feedback when you don't really know how you're performing. The second is anonymity, which is that feeling of a lack of appreciation. and do you actually belong in the job? And the third of which is irrelevance, which is a lack of connection with work. So then that brings me into this model here that I created. So you'll see here within that inner circle there, that's the components of self-determination theory, where you have your relatedness, your competence, your autonomy. And then on the outside, you have those demotivators, essentially, and what makes it an unpleasant working environment with irrelevance, anonymity, and measurement. So in a sense here, each one of these arrows that's pointing to one of the pieces of the circle on the inside, it's kind of like a continuum. One side's negative, one side's positive. Where can you try to push yourself to that positive side? So for example here, the easiest one that's kind of to explain here is irrelevance and relatedness. Are you able to apply what you're working for? Does your job really matter? Or are you happy and do you feel welcomed with that relatedness side? On the other side, we have competence and anonymity. So with anonymity, it's that lack of appreciation, but competence is that wanting to learn more, wanting to advance upon your skills. So with that lack of appreciation with anonymity, does your manager trust you? Do they believe in you? Can you continue on through that competence? And then finally with autonomy and measurement, autonomy is that need to be in control of one's decisions, and that was related to those goals that were set, as I mentioned previously. And in measurement, you don't know where you're at with those goals. If you don't have that measurement, how are you building up to what your goals are? And then that brings me into organizational culture here. So in order to successfully implement a flexible work environment, you have to have a culture that supports it. So a culture that is willing to offer a lending hand is more likely to succeed in terms of flexible work. So in doing so, there should be a significant amount of time. One of the studies that I found that half of the time should be focused on adaptive performance, allowing employees to work through their own problems, trying to work on problems that actually matter. And then they need to find a schedule that can develop cohesiveness within the team. So this is one example here that you may use for that. This can vary. So I know some companies, rather than doing that team performance cycle meeting on Mondays, they do it on Fridays. But essentially what you have to have is that, what are we doing this week? And then you need to have your reflection at the end of the week. And then you need to have individual meetings with each of your team members so that you can get caught up on their individual needs in a sense that way. And then moving into trust here, trust is probably arguably one of the most important factors for a flexible work environment, because trust is needed between both parties in order for this to successfully work. You need to be trusted by your manager, and your manager has to trust you, and this has to be felt from both ways. It can't just be said. In doing so, this is actually going to serve as a motivator for the employee, that they feel trusted by their manager to take on this high-risk job, so they're going to try to do their best work. And then through this, it also helps the employee feel empowered to solve their own problems because they're trusted to do it, so I'm going to put forth my best effort for it. In addition, you're also going to increase your performance and effectiveness, and employees are also going to feel valued by the company in doing so. And then lastly, that trust is very heavily influenced by a company's culture. So back to that book that I was referring to by Kristen Hadid, she found that in developing that sense of trust, her culture formed around trust, and that created a positive work environment for her employees. And so just to kind of wrap everything up here for you, first off, we know that flexible work environment is not something that was a pandemic thing and we're going to go away from it. It's something that's going to be here for the long term. So with that, we need to be aware of some of the inequalities that may exist for that. So we need to be aware of the gender expectations here, the differences between blue collar and white collar work, and the differences that may exist between small and large organizations and their ability to offer flexible work. And then third here, we need to focus on the employee needs. This can be done through using self-determination theory, that empowering leadership style, and through that employee-centered leadership instead of focusing on that job-centered so much. And then lastly, we need to find a way to develop a culture that's centered around trust to be able to improve the productivity of employees and just kind of motivate them through that culture there as well. And so then I guess, is there any questions?
I have a question, Maddie. First of all, great presentation. I like the visual aspect of the PowerPoint. I think you put that together very well. good content as well. So I know somebody that works for Emeritus, and this goes to the slide about trust. They have a software that monitors when people are on or off, and if they go to the restroom, they have to sort of clock out and then clock back in. And do you find that a lot of people are using that, or are companies just trusting their employees more?
So based off of, I'm going to say my personal experience, because I worked for somewhere where that was what happened. And I think that in terms of, especially financial institutions where there's a lot of risk associated with working from home, they are doing that, which essentially that's kind of needed to save themselves in a sense. But I think that it can serve as a demotivator in the terms of employees. Because like from my experiences, we had very strict requirements that we had to meet each month. And if we didn't meet those, then we got put on a disciplinary action program. And so that kind of served, a lot of those were, at the time that we were doing it, it was kind of hard to meet those, so they ended up taking those off for the time being. But if you're not meeting those, it's not suddenly a how can I improve this, it's oh my god, now my job's on the line. So they kind of have to have a balance there, because from the employee side, or from the company side, they have to find a way to balance it in terms of protecting themselves that way.
Right. Sort of motivating through positive versus negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You will be in trouble if you don't do.
Yes.
Yep.
So do you think a lot of these places, it just takes a few bad apples, kind of, to
Mhm.
spoil it for everyone, and somebody was pushing the boundaries and not doing what they were supposed to, and then everybody else is susceptible to that. So, in your job that you're going to be taking here this summer, will be doing more in-person managing others, or remote
So
stuff, or?
I'm actually going to be working as a project coordinator, so I'll be working in the office most of the time, but I do have the flexibility to work from home if I so choose.
And the people you supervise will be?
They're all, so it's a manufacturing firm, so I'm just essentially overseeing the jobs. So I don't really oversee any individuals, but I'm going in as a beginner, so I'm going to be more of the, they're going to be managing me.
Okay.
But yep, so yeah. Any other questions?
Can I just push it a little bit here and on to education?
We'll see.
Did you take a lot of online? Did you take a lot of online classes over
I
there?
took a few, yeah.
Okay, so is it the same when we're preparing people for the workforce? Is it more important to be in person, or can that be done remotely, or,
I think it depends. It depends on what you're talking about. Some of the classes, all the classes that I took online, I think that they were fine to do, but like your accounting classes, I can tell you I would not pass those online. So those need to be in person. But
Because you're such an excellent face-to-face instructor.
yeah. But there is some that I think that are valuable because you get to learn on your own, so you get to learn your own problem-solving skills. So those are, I think that the classes that you don't have to get a specific answer for it, but you can, if you can support your answer and it's right, I think those type of classes are perfect to have online because you get to support that. However, we know that with technology, there's been a lot of ways to cheat your